He was the world's youngest, Barbados's first and longest serving central bank governor. Join us for tributes and a look at the legacy of the late Sir Courtney Newlands Blackman. That's up next on Carib Nation. Hello, welcome to Carib Nation. I'm Doris Dean. Sir Courtney Newlands Blackman, the founder and former visionary leader of the Central Bank of Barbados, died on Friday, March 16, 2021, at the age of 88. To pay tribute and review his legacy, I have invited three distinguished Barbadians to join me. Dr. Sir George Alleyne, Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, and former director of the Pan American Health Organization, His Excellency Noel Lynch, Ambassador of Barbados to the United States and permanent representative to the Organization of American States, Winston Cox, former governor of the Central Bank of Barbados and former executive director of the Inter-American Development Bank. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me and welcome to Carib Nation.
Thank you, Darius.
Thank you very much.
We're going to be talking about a very important person in the life of Barbados. And I'll start with you, Sir George, asking you as a longtime friend of Sir Courtney to talk a little bit about his younger days and what he was like as a young person.
Well, thank you very much, Dennis. I think Courtney would have objected to your saying his younger days because he would have averred that he was ever young. Well, thank you very much. And thank you very much for bringing me together with Noel and Winston, whom I haven't seen for some time. Let me go back a bit, how I knew of Courtney even before we were born. Courtney tells a story that our fathers, who were school teachers, went to get their marriage licenses at the same time. And they were upstairs getting their marriage licenses while their prospective wives were down below waiting on these two men who were talking about school and politics. So that, in fact, is a link that bound Courtney and myself from then. Wow. We went to Harrison College at the same time, and I knew him then in Harrison College. And even in Harrison College from those days, Courtney was known for the fact that he wouldn't keep his mouth shut. Courtney was always talking, and he had all sorts of good things to say. We went through the same forms in school, went into the classical sixth form together. Courtney always reminds me of how much I've forgotten of the classics. He was never failed to remind me of that. And we left Harrison College about the same time and came to Jamaica to the university, at then the University College of the West Indies. Courtney had many attributes. And one of the attributes that Courtney had, and he would never be dissuaded about that he would have played cricket for the West Indies only if he hadn't decided to pursue an academic career. Courtney believed with a fervor in his capacity to bat and to field in the slips. And in spite of the many catches he dropped in the slips, Courtney would have that he was one of the best slip fielders that the university had ever seen. He would always contend also that his batting, and he gave pride of place to his batting. And interestingly enough, I did not think of Courtney then or know of Courtney as a tennis player. But after that, he took to tennis. And there are lots of stories I'll have to tell about some of the things I knew of Courtney after we left university. He had a distinguished career in the university. And after the university, he went to work in various places. And I have some interesting stories to tell of Courtney in those later years, which exemplify the kind of man Courtney was, the kind of his character. And I'll have a few more things to say about that phase of his life. But I loved him dearly, words and all, I loved him dearly.
Ambassador Lynch, in terms of Sir Courtney's role in the Barbados government, he undertook a very responsible, challenging job at a very young age. And that must have, it shows us the level of confidence that the government had in him. Can you talk a little bit about that challenging time for the economy of Barbados, for the economy of the world at that time, and what it was like for him to undertake that?
Well, Darius, first of all, thank you for having me this evening. I kind of think that Mr. Cox would be more able to answer that question than I would ever be. But I'll tell you this: I met Sir Courtney when I was old. I mean, I didn't know him from a young man, but I do remember. I am very familiar with those days and all the discussions when he shepherded Barbados through that economic recession in the 1980s. I do remember that. Facing deep criticism for calls for wage restraint from both politicians and the trade unions. I know that Mr. would know a lot about that, but Courtney never flinched. You know, he had this characteristic resoluteness. He defended his stance as he would on many of the other issues that he determined threatened the soundness of keeping a small, open economy on the correct development path. I remember him tying the Barbados dollar to the US dollar rather than the British pound, defending the establishment of a central bank rather than maintaining the stance on the currency board, or his argument that there was a strong purposeful link between income, the balance of payments, and the stability of the exchange rate. Even the construction of the architecturally imposing central bank at the time. I mean, Courtney, I remember him in the media defending these things, that would do more. This central bank would do more than just be a bank. You know, a central bank, he argued, served the community, but furthermore, it should be shared with the community. And that's why his central bank had to have a performing arts center, performing arts auditorium, as well as other communal spaces that invited the public in as a way of breaking down this traditionally established barriers between the mystifiers and the mystified on economic and financial matters. He defended, Courtney believed that you could actually speak to these people in plain, simple English, in language that they could understand. And that's why I remember him being also, at the time, going through these deep recessions. He also demanded and oversaw a central bank-backed scheme for developing small and medium-sized enterprises in the country, which was unheard of at the time, and being backed by the central bank. I remember him, you know, in his world, economic development didn't have to be a mystery. All citizens needed to be exposed to some understanding of economics and finance. I remember hearing him say those words. And I mean, to give a man a job at 39 years old, to be your first central banker, and then for him to be reelected, or to be reassigned 3 terms for 3 terms, tells you a lot about what the government at the time must have felt about the qualities of this young man. And as Sir George has said, you know, I don't know the part about him never stopping talking, which I believed. But I remember one night going to his house, and I guess if we were there for 2 hours, he spoke for an hour and 45 minutes. I remember that. But what I do remember about him, it was that he had this very affable, very jovial personality. I mean, the man was telling jokes all night. If you had met him in a rum shop, you would never have known that this man was a man with a Ph.D. in economics or whatever. He was that kind of human being. And I think, and I'll just say this finally, he's left an enduring legacy at the OAS, because there were many people here who have said, who knew him from that era, who will tell you that whenever there was serious debate in that place, particularly as it related to finance and economics for small developing countries, and people were getting contentious, Courtney diffused the entire thing with his jokes and his jovial manner, and explained things in a very simple way. So he was a man that I think that we will always remember, a Barbadian first, but a Caribbean man overall.
Yeah, I'd like to come back and talk some more about his legacy in the diplomatic arena. Winston Cox, his whole arena was your forte, and that is the economy of Barbados. What kind of a bar did he set for the rest of you following?
Well, I knew Courtney from my school days when he was a master at Harrison College, and he tried to instruct us in historical analysis. In the very early day, and then of course he hired me at the central bank. In the very early days of the bank was established in 1972, and the economy was hit by a crisis in 1973 when the price of oil went through the roof. And that was one of the first tests, really, that the bank had to address, because the increase in the price of oil meant that a lot of the foreign exchange that we were earning had to be diverted from paying for general goods and services and things that we were consuming to paying for oil almost overnight. As there was a bit of good luck in that the price of sugar also went through the roof, and we were able to earn substantial amount of foreign exchange from the sugar industry. And at that time, the pound began to sag, and that's when, by 1975, he advised the government very firmly to peg the Barbados dollar to the US dollar at the rate of two Barbados dollars to one US dollar, because he said, you have to make it simple so that the man in the street can understand. And Noel has emphasized the perception that Courtney had of a central bank. It was really an institution of learning and teaching, and it was an information center. And above all, it was a public institution, so it had to have spaces that invited the public into its domain. And that was part of the driving genius behind the very successful performing arts center, Frank Cullimore Hall. It was also part of the genius behind the plaza around the bank, because people would be encouraged not to view the bank as something external to their daily lives, but something that had an institution that had an impact on their lives and that provided information which guided their thinking. Emphasis on information to the public was something that he put at the top of his list. He realized that the policies of the bank could be improved and understood or accepted by a thinking public. And to think, people needed information, they needed explanations, but more importantly, they needed to make up their own minds, and they would do that on the basis of credible and timely information provided to the public by an institution that in which they had confidence and which they believed was able to collect and disseminate this information in an impartial and unbiased manner. That was a very important principle and fundamental idea of his role of the central bank. Things like monetary policy and exchange rate policy, obviously that is what central banks do. But central banks have lots of other things to do in his telling of it. And Noel has referred to his creation of export credit schemes and lending schemes to support small businesses. These were novel ideas in terms of the development of central banking in the Caribbean. Of all the central banks in the Caribbean, I think now, with the possible exception of the Bank of the Bahamas, all of the banks had some external person sent either by the IMF or one of the older established central banks, usually the Bank of England, to be their first governor. Not so in the case of Barbados. They decided to entrust the governorship to a young man. I think the principle there being that if you want to create an institution, you put it in the hands of a young person. If you want to stabilize an institution, then you can get someone of more mature years to take on that role. Let me stop there for the time being.
I guess that showed the confidence in his potential to grow the institution once he got started. I suppose one allows a young person the freedom to make mistakes along the way and learn.
Well, also, he did not have a well laid down track, so he could branch off into new areas, new ideas, and try out new things. And if some of them don't work, you could always, as he always said, Prime Minister Barrow, if he thought that Courtney was heading down the wrong road, he'd
Would have stopped
put it down to his youth, his youthful enthusiasm.
Yeah.
He took full advantage of his youthful ignorance, as it were.
So George, as a young person taking on this role, how did you see him on the sort of flip side of the coin? How as his personal life he took?
Both Winston and Noel have spoken about his technical capability. There are two other aspects of Courtney I'd like to address. One is Gloria. Gloria was the star by which Courtney's life was set. And I always remember he would tell us, we both Barbadians came to Jamaica, married Jamaican women, and it so happened his wife and my wife went to the same school. I don't know if there's any, but there's one aspect of Courtney that I want to emphasize. I've always emphasized, I have never known, maybe few, men who've had the integrity that Courtney had. If I had to categorize Courtney, he's a man of integrity. And I tell the story, I don't think he would mind my telling it. When Courtney left and went to work in a company in Barbados, in Jamaica, Courtney happened to have information about something was happening in the trade union. And the management of the group asked Courtney if he would divulge what he heard. Courtney said no, that was privileged information. And Courtney, with a wife and 2 young children, preferred to leave the job rather than to divulge that information. So strong, such a strong character he was, and so the nature of his integrity was such that Courtney would stand up for the principles to which he adhered. And that is one of the aspects of Courtney that's often not recognized, because he sometimes was so jovial and he made a lot of, as Winston would say, he could talk and talk and talk. But Courtney was a man of really, if he had a conviction and he really believed in something, he would stand by it, and he would be prepared to take the consequences. It is one of the qualities of Courtney that I have got to, that I came to recognize and to admire after he left college in the various jobs that he had. And he would tell me stories of the central bank, as Winston referred, in which he had the deep and abiding conviction there's only one kind of management, that is good management. And Courtney would seek to show that the principles of management were applicable wherever you went. And the terms in which he spoke to the Barbadian public about good management were very, very refreshing, very, very refreshing indeed. He and I would have long discussions about various aspects. He was a great fan of Peter Drucker's, the management guru, and we would have lots and lots of discussions about management and management practices. And Courtney, also something that should be said, Courtney not only spoke well, Courtney wrote very well. his capacity to express himself in good prose was excellent, excellent. Uh, he was a very well-rounded personality, I would have said. Very well-rounded personality. He was keen on athletics. He was no doubt a man of great intellect, and also, in my view, a man of great integrity.
He was very confident in himself, but yet at the same time, he was one of those down-to-earth people who almost showed a humility that made him one of the people. He was quite comfortable wherever he was. And yet, as you said, his focus always seemed to be, let's make it understandable for everybody. I think he had great respect for the people of Barbados. He was not one of those people who felt that these were uneducated peons that you could lord over. He had great respect for the people of Barbados and what his role was in educating them and keeping them informed. Noah Lynch, would you have another comment on that?
Yeah, I it's interesting how I mean, these two gentlemen would have known Sir Courtney much better than I did. I only had a personal interaction with him maybe twice in my life. But it's interesting how our opinions converge. And then the research that I did, I remember asking, when I presented the tribute to him at the OAS, I remember doing some research to find out exactly what kind of a man he was. And people said, the erudite, articulate, affable person. But there were something that Sir George said that one person told me that Courtney distinguished himself when he worked on Wall Street as a thinker, a decision maker, a man of huge integrity, and an overall genuine human being. That's what he was described by an older man who I got some information on Courtney. And the other thing I remember about him was he had two sons, a twin. I remember that went to school at Harrison College. And there were, I think this is one of the two twins that became I don't know if they were the ones that were the tennis players, but I remember these two
Yes, they
were involved in athletics at the time. I have a younger brother, who also went to that institution on Krypton Street. I went to the other place, the other more important place in St. John. But those two boys, I remember I went to the sports at Harrison College to see my brother run. And the two Blackman boys were running. And so Courtney was there. And I remember him actually being revered by the people were actually whispering, that's Courtney Blackman. I mean, this was about in the early to mid 1970s. I said, that's Courtney Blackman, as if he was some god or something that was there. That's how people looked at him. That's the man, because this man took on the trade unions, he took on the political directorate, he took on everybody. Then I remember being at his house that night. I was there with Owen Arthur that night, and he said that Prime Minister Barra gave him a job when he was half asleep, and that he would never again. That when he offered him the job, he had just woken up, or he didn't just woken up, or he woke him up in the middle of the night, or he just woken up early in the morning and offered him this job, and he decided to take this job. And he told him again that, Errol, I ain't taking the job from anybody again. I took this job when I was half asleep. So I was not in my full mind. I remember him saying that the evening that I was there. But I do remember a part of the institution that was the central bank. Even as a young man, I remember this institution being, people had so much respect for the central bank, because there was a debate going on. I'm not an economist about whether or not small developing countries like ours with these open economies and this few dollars that we have to spend, these few pennies, and we're thinking, talk over this, needed a central bank, or if we just don't need a currency board, what were we doing with a central bank? I remember that debate, and people that seemingly were more knowledgeable than I could ever be, saying that Barbados didn't need a central bank, didn't need the central bank, and this imposing structure that Courtney was building, they didn't need it. And I remember him, as I said, backing and stating his claim. But there was another piece, and people need to remember this too. I'll tell you two other very little quick stories. You know, the same person that drives me today as the driver for the embassy in Washington drove Sir Courtney. He also drove Sir William Douglas. He drove Charlie Skeet. He drove all of these people that were there. And he says, he tells me this story. I don't know if they would even mind me telling it, that some people in the embassy complained that the driver was making more than them because the driver earned a lot of overtime. And Courtney told him, well, why don't you exchange places then with the driver? Why don't you come then and drive me and let the driver do your job? And they never came back to him again with that. I remember him telling me that. And then the other thing that he said that everywhere Courtney went, his emphasis was strongly on developing the human resource. Under his leadership at many organizations, whether it was here in the United States or in Barbados, so Courtney ensured that several employees completed professional academic qualifications, participated in regional and international conferences and programs that permitted them to build out their various intellectual competencies. That's what he did. He was a man so involved in knowing what everybody in the organization did. And my same driver says, you know, he was very much involved in knowing not just that you drove him and dropped him off, but your family and how were you doing, your finances, and how were you doing, where your children were being educated, and whether or not you get a mortgage and pay for your house. He was interested in people. You know, that he was a genuine human being who immersed himself in being, you know, in everybody's, not you know, business and not in people's business, but he wanted to know once you worked for him and with him, that he was involved in your development. So I think that is another feather in his cap to this real human being.
Yes, I think everyone said that. My own sister always said that, could not believe that he had the confidence in her at age 25 to give her that position as a manager of the Frank Cullimore Hall. But she said she told him, I don't know anything about management. He said, well, you can learn. We'll fix that. Yeah. So he was always willing to help build that potential and see everybody to the next level. But I worked at Voice of America and have many interviews with him, and he would come into the studio. And once we were done, he'd say, so do you have something else to do? Can we go have a coffee? And he'd sit and just talk, just to find out more about me. He said, I know about Allison, so what do I know about you now?
He loved to talk, and he was
he
was a great storyteller, but he also had a laugh that was like the sea. It just rolled and rolled and rolled.
Yes. Well, I think that's a perfect way to end this and to summarize it all. Thank you all so much for joining and for talking about a friend to all of us, a friend to Barbados, Sir Courtney Newlands Blackman. He will be remembered as a man of integrity, a pioneer, the founding father of the Barbados Central Bank, and a fearless visionary leader who directed the trajectory of the Barbados economy. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Thanks again for watching us. And thanks to you for watching us in Carib Nation. Until next time, I'm Doris Dean. And remember, our motto is one people, one culture, one Caribbean, one nation.